the Honourable Bill Boyd is the Minister of Energy and Resources, as well as the Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Telecommunications. He's the MLA for Kindersley and is one of the founding members of the Saskatchewan Party. He's been involved in the Saskatchewan political scene for nearly 2 decades. He's MLA for Kindersley from 1991 until he stepped down in 2002. He was originally a progressive conservative MLA and became the leader of that party in 1994, was re-elected in 95, and then with 3 of his colleagues joined with 4 Liberal MLAs to found the Saskatchewan Party. When he was re-elected as one of 26 MLAs under the Saskatchewan Party banner, that was in 1999, and he was once again elected in 2007. He and his wife Lynn operate a pedigreed seed feed farm near Edson, and it's really my delight to ask you to join me in welcoming him to the podium, the Honourable Bill Boyd.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Yes, indeed, the legislature is sitting, so I have to get back over to the zoo, as we call it, sometime here fairly soon to take perhaps questions from the opposition about various areas of interest to them. So I will immediately upon finishing my speech, I will bolt out of here and leave any questions to my Deputy Minister, Kent, and which is probably a better thing anyway, as far as energy policy for our province is concerned. Let me just start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon and bring greetings from Premier Brad Wall and the Government of Saskatchewan. On behalf of my colleagues and myself, I congratulate the organizers of this conference. Our options in terms of the energy future of our province are very much on our minds. This event is the latest example of the scholarly discussion that the Johnson Choyama School enables, a scholarly discussion that firmly grounded in real-world needs and issues which inform public policy not only here in Saskatchewan but across Canada as well. Today at the conference, that's all about policy. I'm going to talk to you about Saskatchewan's energy policies. And I'm going to begin by giving you a brief overview of what the energy portfolio that we have here in Saskatchewan. I'll highlight some of the strategies we're employing to capitalize on our strengths, and I'll touch on some of the key considerations associated with moving forward on a more integrated and national approach to energy. Our provincial budget last week was entitled the Saskatchewan Advantage, and that's a comment on the resources and opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan that we're blessed with in our province, and I believe on the sound fiscal policies and public policies that are helping to organize those opportunities. I'll just make note for a moment. I notice one of my colleagues, opposition MLA, Sandra Morin, is here in the crowd as well. Just acknowledge Sandra. Saskatchewan is indeed an energy powerhouse in Canada, and we're quite proud of it. We are never tired of using that line in speeches all across Canada. We consider that our province accounts for over 1/4 of Canada's primary energy production. Our per capita energy production is the highest in Canada. Saskatchewan's primary energy production comes from coal, oil, natural gas, hydro, uranium, wind, and biofuels. We are the only province in Canada and one of the few jurisdictions in the world that has commercial production in all of those sources of energy. Saskatchewan is a significant net exporter of energy, one of only 4 provinces in Canada that produces more energy than it consumes. We're the 2nd largest oil producer in Canada and the 3rd largest producer of both coal and natural gas. We are the 2nd largest uranium producer in the world, accounting for about 20% of the world's uranium production. We have some of the largest and richest uranium deposits in the world. Our ore bodies are in the order of magnitude much richer than you'll find anywhere else in the world. Our energy products, including uranium and petroleum, are considered to be top Canadian and Saskatchewan exports and are major contributors to the wealth and well-being of our province. If you look at last week's budget, you will see one of the measures of the impact that the energy sector has on our economy. Energy resource revenues, including land sales, oil, gas, uranium, royalties, are estimated to be over $1.9 billion for fiscal 2011-12. Of course, that means a tremendous amount of activity in Saskatchewan, a great number of jobs associated with it in our province. It's a great contributor of revenue for the provincial base, roughly the same as individual income tax and larger than corporate income tax, sales, and federal transfers. So you can see the magnitude that it has on our economy. When you combine the significant resource base with growing energy demand around the world, particularly in Asia, you can see the very, very exciting opportunities that it presents for Saskatchewan. So how do we build on that? How do we build on what we are calling the Saskatchewan Advantage? How do we advance the interests of Saskatchewan as an energy powerhouse? Let me briefly describe our energy policy framework. Our policy involves making a broad approach that cuts across a number of different ministries and agencies. There are a number of reasons for that, but chiefly it's because we are a major energy exporter and that we have Crown corporations active in components of that energy sector. If you're into metaphor, you can visualize our energy policy framework as a big overarching umbrella with a number of key support elements. The first key element of the framework is managed by my ministry, Ministry of Energy and Resources, very capably handled by Deputy Minister Kent Campbell. It is responsible for the conservation, management, and development of our vast energy and mineral resources. The ministry has a regulatory role to ensure safe and responsible production by industry of our resources, and legislation such as the Oil and Gas Conservation Act and the Mineral Resources Act helps make all of that happen. We have policies in place to ensure that industry pays for costs of decommissioning their sites through the programs such as the Orphan Well program. The ministry also has a major role in ensuring that the people of Saskatchewan get appropriate economic returns from industry out of resource development. Clearly, our oil and royalty and tax regimes are an important component of energy policies. And we believe that our regimes were developed to ensure certainty and stability for industry while guaranteeing our citizens fair rent on the resources that the people of Saskatchewan own. I gave you an indication of the size of that rent, $1.9 billion this year, and the fiscal impact a few minutes ago. Our ministry also has initiatives in place to encourage investment attraction and value-added opportunities. We promote the province's wealth at various global industry forums and have consistently undertaken investment attraction missions to Asia and other places around the world. We also support research through a variety of funding mechanisms and programs. They include, for example, funding the Petroleum Technology Research Center, extension of the Saskatchewan Petroleum Research Incentive, and a major expansion announced last week to our subsurface geological laboratory. So that's the Ministry of Energy and Resources and its contribution under the umbrella policy. But as I also noted, we are not only the only agency delivering government's energy agenda. Our colleagues at Enterprise Saskatchewan, for instance, fund Saskatchewan's biofuel program, the first in Canada with an ethanol mandate. Similarly, the Ministry of Environment funds our government's Go Green program, which supports non-utility scale renewable power generation activities here in our province. The Environment Ministry also leads provincial efforts on climate change policy in partnership with other agencies, including the Ministry of Energy and Resources. They are all key elements under Saskatchewan energy policies, the umbrella. Now, in a number of other jurisdictions, you'll see climate change policy statements more explicitly linked to energy programs. Here in Saskatchewan, we focus on ensuring that our range of climate and energy programs and activities represents the balanced interests of our government as a whole, an approach that yields similar results. Other agencies involved in energy policy include Sask Energy with its natural gas delivery and conservation programs, Sask Power, which of course provides both electricity delivery services and electricity conservation programs. Sask Power is a major player in any discussions when it comes to energy policy. In addition to its primary mandate of electricity production and delivery, the corporation manages power conservation and efficiency measures as well. In other jurisdictions without Crown corporations, you would be more likely to see such conservation programs delivered separately through a different agency, most likely an energy department. Sask Power also provides the price support necessary to allow higher cost renewable energy projects in Saskatchewan, such as wind power, to proceed. And we have to keep that in mind. We are a jurisdiction that generates about 50 to 55% of our generation capacity from coal in Saskatchewan. These are legacy assets that generate at a very, very low cost, some $12 a megawatt approximately. When you bring in other renewables, the range that Sask Power is buying power from right now is sort of in the $100 to $120 a megawatt range. So you can see the considerable additional cost to renewables. However, it is certainly an initiative of this government. We believe that that's an important thing to be involved in, renewables to add to the energy mix that we have here in Saskatchewan. Sask Power has an overarching action plan in place to repower the province's power system in the long term. That plan consists of 3 short, medium, and long-term plans that take us out to 2015, 2023, and 2033, respectively. All power sources and options remain under consideration. There will be greater use of hydro and wind power, more deployment of carbon capture and storage technologies, and more cooperation with other governments, with private sector investors, and with the First Nations. And you may have heard just earlier today that the government of Saskatchewan has struck a deal with the FSIN on power development in Saskatchewan going forward. First Nations people will become a full partner in terms of generation of power in the future in Saskatchewan. We believe that this is a very, very positive announcement that will see First Nations more intimately integrated into power generation in Saskatchewan in the future. The Crown corporations, their services and their programs are a major element under Saskatchewan's energy policy umbrella. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention uranium and nuclear power in more detail under any discussion of energy and electricity policy options. As many of you recall, we undertook an extensive review of further uranium development and nuclear energy a few years ago. We had the first report of the Uranium Development Partnership, and then the Future of Uranium in Saskatchewan public consultations, so ably chaired by Dan Perrins. This then resulted in our policy statements in regard to the future development of our uranium resources. This process that we went through was the first time that Saskatchewan has looked at the full spectrum of opportunity associated with this strategic resource. As government, we said no to large-scale nuclear power plant at this time, but we did reaffirm our support in the industry, for the industry here, and value-added activity connected to it in Saskatchewan. We have committed to nuclear science and research agenda that involves the evaluation of small-scale nuclear power reactors as a generation opportunity for the future. My cabinet colleague, Minister Norris, recently announced funding for a new research center for nuclear medicine and related material sciences at the University of Saskatchewan, as well as an investment in advanced research cyclotron to improve medical health services at the Royal University Hospital. Such announcements contribute to our government and our province's research agenda, certainly, but they also factor into our overall energy strategy and policy going forward. Obviously, any discussion on nuclear must account for the recent difficulties now facing the country of Japan and the people of Japan, the aftermath of the earthquake and tsunami, and damage to the country's nuclear reactors. And we would want to say certainly our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Japan under this very, very difficult time and situation that they are faced with. I think, our Premier's comments that this calls for more science rather than less science, I think is something that we should all consider very much. Sadly, it appears that the book will not be closed on that for some period of time, and that nuclear reactors in the future will be, I suspect, more difficult to commission. These events do highlight the risks associated with energy development, and there will be many lessons, I think, learned from what has happened in Japan. We believe, though, that the world will continue towards nuclear power as an important source of energy moving forward, given the limitations associated with renewable sources and carbon emissions associated with fossil fuels. Just to recap, on energy policy work, there is a lot that's being done in Saskatchewan, and it is being coordinated through cooperation among our line ministries and through Crown corporations, as well as other players such as the Saskatchewan Research Council, the 2 universities, and the private sector. Let me move on now from our provincial energy policy framework and talk about whether Canada and its governments should move forward with a more integrated energy strategy. Should we have a single energy strategy for our country? That's certainly a topic of much interest recently, and one of my fellow energy ministers and I are likely to address an upcoming meeting in July with respect to this. Our meetings and deliberations from it will prove valuable in framing the issues associated with such considerations. Saskatchewan is open to considering various policy options and has been proactive in taking a more regional approach to energy policy and energy development. It is certainly one of the reasons why we are involved in the New West Partnership Initiative. Last April, Premier Wall, Alberta Premier Ed Stelmach, and former British Columbia Premier Gordon Campbell launched the New West Partnership, creating, as the news release put, an economic powerhouse of 9 million people with a combined GDP of more than $550 billion. Now, of course, we need to look into what that all means for Saskatchewan going forward. We have signed an energy MOU under the auspices of the New West Partnership with my counterparts in Alberta and British Columbia. We believe that these are very, very good opportunities for Saskatchewan. Under the MOU, our 3 provinces have started to work and target investment opportunities in Asia and undertake joint consultations with industry on issues of its strategic interest. We expect to collaborate on regulatory streamlining, continued promotion of the New West energy goods and investment opportunities, and acceleration of the development of use of green energy technologies going forward. We believe that taking a more regional approach to energy policy and development through such means as the New West Partnership has merit and frankly has a better chance of making an immediate impact on a comprehensive national policy would do. A regional approach recognizes the distinctive geology and resource commonality in the New West, and as Canada's 3 leading hydrocarbon producing provinces. Now, that's not to say that we're not interested in discussing a broader option, but to date there's been no consensus on what a national strategy would look like. There are obviously very different interests between energy producing provinces and energy consuming provinces. But we look forward to ongoing discussions with my colleagues, other ministers of energy from around the country at upcoming meetings later this summer. I submit that there are several key considerations that must be in place for a national framework to proceed. First, that the primacy of the provinces in regard to resource development and energy production must be acknowledged and respected. The Constitution assigns these rights and responsibilities to the provinces, and as such, any Canadian energy strategy must be provincially driven, not federally driven. The provinces, working with their federal partners, must jointly determine how they may wish to proceed on a more collaborative basis while still retaining their individual rights to develop their own resources in the ways that they see best to suit their province. We have now seen how terribly wrong things can go when this does not occur. And of course, I'm speaking of the National Energy Program from the 80s. That program was quite rightly perceived as a resource grab, a transfer of resource wealth from provinces that were trying to develop and diversify their economies. The NEP turned into a profit-making export industry into a weakened domestic-oriented industry that produced less oil and gas from companies that needed subsidies to encourage new development. Producer provinces suffered at losses, and by extension, so did the residents of those provinces. The National Energy Program is still the elephant in the room for many of us. They certainly say that elephants never forget, and well, we won't either when it comes to that program. That leads us to a second key consideration that must be in place for a national energy strategy to proceed. It must not be a mechanism for wealth transfer and wealth destruction. We are aware in some quarters talk of a national strategy includes discussion of carbon pricing measures. If such measures result in a transfer of monies from energy-producing provinces, then we have a clear echo of what we saw in the National Energy Program. If carbon pricing measures are to be even considered, they must be provincially, not federally administered. Our equivalency agreements or some other mechanisms need to be established between provinces and Canada so the pricing measures allow jurisdictions to keep their wealth associated with resources at home. I'm optimistic, and I believe that the policy landscape has changed since the time of the National Energy Program, particularly with new discoveries of hydrocarbon resources across our country. We see shale gas now in Ontario and Quebec, and for example, crude oil resources in the Gulf of the St. Lawrence. A Canadian policy that benefits all regions of our country, I believe, is still possible. We will continue to work with other provinces and with the federal government on any number of energy files where it makes sense for our province of Saskatchewan. We want to be a major contributor to the continental energy security and to furthering the clean energy dialogue that began a few years ago. We want to be a part of the solution on climate change, on continuing to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, on continuing to the leading edge work that has been done in the industry in creating a much better environmental footprint. But we will not accept federal policies that are ultimately punitive to our province and to our producers. We will not accept any policies that could derail our economic momentum here in Saskatchewan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today to talk generally about our energy resources and our energy policies here in Saskatchewan. These issues are obviously very complex, and our opportunities, however, in Saskatchewan are very significant. In closing, let me note that the future of energy in this province is indeed very bright. We have a wealth of resources that are the envy of provinces and other jurisdictions around the world. We certainly are positioned for future development of those resources, both from a domestic use and for export. We have some challenges, but we certainly believe those challenges can be met. We continue to develop our resources in a sustainable manner and continue to green up our energy sources, continue to be innovative in coordinating our energy policy, and continue to deliver the Saskatchewan Advantage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Boyd, you've raised a lot of questions. Some of them were touched on this morning, including elephants in the room. There were a couple of elephants, including yours, and the description of the energy mix in the province and the institutional mix that goes along with it is a really frank reminder of the complexity of the challenges that that lie ahead of us. Thank you so much for taking the time out to bring the message to us and stimulate the discussion. I'm sorry you have to go, so you can't answer questions. I can't imagine there aren't some questions out there, but then that's why we have deputy ministers. So thank you very much again, Minister. And now I don't want to invite the deputy up here unless there are questions, but I don't, on the other hand, want to discourage any questions. So if anybody would like to, if anybody is moved to ask for a little more elaboration, this would be the time to do it. On the other hand, there is dessert, so I'll let you think about it. And if anyone wanders after dessert or coffee to the microphone, I'll ask Deputy Minister Campbell to come on up and engage. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your lunch.